Greetings, everyone. My name is Tim Brown, and I am director at IA&A at the Hillier Contemporary Art Gallery here in Washington, D.C. I would like to welcome you to our online Zoom discussion with Nia Alexander Campbell and Fatima Al-Dosari. Nia is currently one of Hillier's featured artists here during the month of March, and an Impart Grant Award winner from Qatar American Institute for Culture, where Fatima is the executive director. Nia is the focus of today's program because she is out of the country and unable to join us here for the exhibition on site. So this is a very rare opportunity to hear from both Nia and Fatima. So let's welcome both of them.
We're good. Thank you so much, Tim, for your time. And we really appreciate the introduction. And also we appreciate the opportunity to exhibit all the Impart artists' artwork. And we really value the partnership with IA&A Hillier, and we hope that this will be the first of many to come. And today's conversation will be for 30 minutes, and we hope that we'll get some questions from anyone who's joining us, and we can answer them at the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
And anyone has a question, they can drop them in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. So as Tim said, my name is Fatima Al-Dosari, the Executive Director at the Qatar American Institute for Culture, or as friends call us, QAIC. And we have a Impart Summit Congress for Creatives program that we host every year. And as part of the program, we have an artist grant that we enable 3 artists every year to be incubated and to have the opportunity to create their own work that aligns with a theme that we have on an annual basis as part of our programs. And the kickoff theme in 2021 was about multicultural diversity, and that was the year where Nia got to participate in, and her other colleagues, Patricia and Josh. And as Tim mentioned, all of their great work is currently exhibited at the gallery. So we really encourage everyone to go and enjoy the art. So without further ado, Nia, everyone is interested to know more about you. So if you can tell us a little bit about your background and your journey and how you came to be here in Qatar, since you and I are in Doha, Qatar. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be here.
Sure. So let's see. I am from Richmond, Virginia, and growing up there, I went to VCU, which is a state school that has a really good art program that's right in the heart of Richmond. So I went to VCU, and then while I was studying there, I studied abroad and landed in Qatar for a semester abroad. So I spent my last spring semester before I graduated. I spent my last spring semester here. I got to see the senior thesis show, the MFA show, everything in person, and I was inspired to apply to their master's program after I graduated. So I got in, and that's how I wound up in Qatar. I was here doing their master's program, and now I'm here freelancing, working as a teacher, and I've been here now for almost 5 years.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. And this month in Qatar, it's Qatar Creates. Every kind of, I would say, half year in March and in October, there's a whole month of festivities happening in the country under the theme of Qatar Creates. And also, March is known for being Marchitecture, the month for architecture. So can you tell us a little bit about Qatar Creates and how VCU Q is participating in the exhibitions that you guys have in that month?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what the exhibition schedule is looking like for VCU right now and Qatar Creates, but I do know that in the Saffron Gallery, the one on the ground floor, there's always rotating exhibitions. Sometimes it's things that VCU organizes by alumni. Sometimes it's things where a certain class in graphic design department or painting department, they might rent out the space just to showcase their class project. So things tend to rotate in the project spaces and in the Saffron Gallery at VCUQ.
That's wonderful. That's great.
Other than that, I mean, right now I'm participating in the Zora program, which is hosted by M7 in Mashera. And so I consider that to be a part of Qatar Creates. I'm not sure if it's officially, but I safely assume that it is, having that it's a design oriented.
Yes.
So I do know that that's going on, along with a lot of programming that they're doing for fashion and design and combining tech with art. So that's what I'm aware of for Qatar Creates right now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about your artwork that was part of Impart and also that is exhibited at IA&A?
Sure. I've brought examples here. Let's see. So we've got a couple of different things. The project that I made was very interdisciplinary. It's called Threadtales. And in short, the project is about my ethnic heritage and my family heritage. So I am Chickahominy Native American and African American. And so I researched the history behind these communities. I researched what they were like individually, what they were like when they were interacting with each other and with the colonists that came, all of this history between these communities in Virginia. And that led me down more and more paths of uncovering my family heritage, people whose names I had never heard before, uncovering sort of difficult things to reconcile, like the slave owning families that at one point owned my ancestors, and also, of course, race relations in general. So it was a lot. But at the same time, I got to encounter a lot of joyful stories, especially with the folktales, different stories of lived experiences, learning that someone started their own business when I thought that, I don't know, they didn't even exist a moment ago. So all that research manifested in first a set of story cubes, which is what this is, what these are. They are made of canvas and they are hand embroidered. How close can we get to the camera before it gets fuzzy? Okay, so they are hand embroidered and made with canvas and painted with watercolor. And these are sturdy. They've got a weight to them. And they're meant to kind of be revered almost. They're sturdy. They don't go anywhere. They're hard. And then I made a second set of cubes with the same imagery, where it's more of a leathery texture with the canvas. And instead, they're soft. They're stuffed with cotton. And so they're light, you can throw them around, and these are meant to be engaged with physically. So if you're telling a story, you use these cubes to tell the story. So they have the same imagery on them. They're just made with a slightly different material and meant to be interacted with differently. So I had 2 sets of story cubes, and in total, there's 102 images between all of the cubes. And then, of course, there's the tapestry that shows, again, all of the images that could fit. And last is the videos. So, of course, I wanted to show how the cubes work. I wanted to share some of the stories I encountered. So I made 9 videos that show either the images or the cubes themselves being used. And I got myself and my family to narrate it. So I'm very happy to say that in addition to me narrating some of the videos, there's also my grandmother, my father, and my brother narrating videos. So the stories told in those, some are sort of scary stories that you tell over a campfire about witches and spells and magic. And then other ones are realistic. It's a summary of the Great Migration, things that people from the Black and Native American communities in Virginia actually experienced. So we've got the cubes, the tapestry, the video, and then lastly, I have a research book where I just put all of the research that went into the project in one place, where it's got lots of pictures and miniature biographies for the different family members I encountered during my research process, and a description of the project. So I know it was a lot, but I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very enriching. And the concept of cubes and storytelling, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So I love stories. It's what got me interested in art and design and in a multimedia kind of way. There's so many different ways to tell a story or to encounter a story. And so for me personally, I am interested in storytelling as like a means of transferring knowledge. So if you're trying to tell the story of a people's in a well-rounded way, what is the most engaging way to tell that story? On one hand, it could be a lecture, and on the other hand, what if it's a game? What if it's something interactable, something colorful that people are drawn to and can learn while engaging with the object itself? So that's where I landed when it comes to storytelling, and why I chose to make story cubes, because they can be played with in short.
That's amazing. And can you tell us about how the process of making these stories?
Oh, like
The cubes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the first set that I made, the hard ones, these are made from oak wood. And so I went and I found oak wood, and I had to get it cut, and then I sanded it myself and laminated it myself. And there's videos of me like hammering stuff together just to make the base. And so inside is the oak wood, and then they're wrapped in canvas. So it's just like the canvas that you might paint on if you go to the store to buy a canvas, except this, it's not gesso. It's just the raw material. So I got the canvas, and everything is stitched together using different types of gold thread. So the thread is gold and it's kind of meant to be loose, a bit rough. Other times you can see the stitches more evidently. So that's how they were put together. And before they were put together, I embroidered each of the images. So everything was laid out and then wrapped over the cube really, really firmly. When it comes to the soft cubes, these were a bit more complicated because they're flexible. So I started with canvas, and then I layered paper over top of it. And after a while, it gets a leathery texture. So then when it comes to trying to combine them together, I combined sewing by hand with using a sewing machine because of the nature of the material. But in order to sew it together, I had to use a different type of thread that's much more thick and sturdy. And so I used slightly different materials with the same goal in mind. And these are stuffed with cotton, specifically cotton balls, because of the way they're more compact. I was able to get enough in there to keep it firm and but still like soft enough to throw around. They're really fun to squeeze if you like stress balls or anything. So that's the process of trying to put these together. It was really fun. It was quite a challenge trying to figure out the materiality of it all, but I'm super satisfied with how they turned out.
It's wonderful. And was there a reason why you chose one to be sturdy and the other one to be soft?
Yeah, so part of it just came from, as you're like working through the creative process, you have one idea, you make a prototype, you might change it. So it began like that, where my original idea was just to have a set of hard cubes. And I'm like, wow, these are really, really nice, but they're not as inviting as I want them to be in terms of interacting with them. They're the kind of things where they're kind of delicate because they're hand embroidered. If they get manhandled too much, it's gonna mess up the embroidery. They're heavy, they're kind of dangerous, so you can't really toss them around. So I said, well, how can I take the same imagery, the same format, and mix it up to make it like possible to be interacted with more comfortably. So that's how we ended up with the soft set of cubes, which is, they're slightly smaller, but these are the ones where they may not be as pretty as the hand embroidered ones because I use more of a printmaking process to get the images onto these, but they are capable of being tossed around. They don't feel as precious necessarily as the firm set. These, you can, there's even a video that I did testing them out where I just chucked it against the wall and I'm like, perfect.
That's great. That's wonderful. And it seems like you worked with a lot of natural also, like, materials. And I'm curious now, the creative process, how artists think of, environmentally kind of conscious materials and practices into, their art making in a way. And how, if it was through this project or other projects, you try to keep your artwork more sustainable and environmentally friendly.
So for one, I do my best to, first of all, use materials that I already have in my studio, which is a very simple way to begin being more sustainable. And it forces you to problem solve. So for example, if I have, I don't know, a piece of paper that's an awkward size, it's still perfectly usable, but maybe I need to figure out ways to collage it with something else. Maybe it forces me to sew them together and something new comes out of that. So I start with going through what's in my studio and how can I combine things in interesting ways that still function the way I need them to. And then from there, I'm like, okay, what do I actually need to buy? And in this case, I had to buy a long roll of canvas. So I'm like, okay, well, what is the type of canvas that works the best for this project that also is as, I don't know if biodegradable is the right word, like scientifically, but something that doesn't use as much plastics in it or resins or things like that. Because I knew that the nature of the art itself, you wouldn't be, like, it's not recyclable.
Yeah.
So I would have to find something that, as it exists, would be as natural as possible. So it's threads, it's cottons, it's watercolors. I use natural pigments when I can. So that's kind of how I started with this process.
Yeah, absolutely, that's wonderful. And can you tell us, so does each cube have like different stories in each image? And what is the most memorable story of all?
Oh, most memorable. Yeah. Oh, let's see. Well, I know that each cube does have an image that is connected to a story that I encountered. Sometimes the stories were fictional, sometimes they were lived experiences. So for example, this one is a pumpkin. So maybe someone from a different culture might have a different association with the pumpkin. Maybe just as Americans, we might think of Cinderella. And so there's these different fictional connections you could make. But for me, when I started with the pumpkin, it's because it's a native plant to North America that indigenous people were cultivating hundreds of years ago. So there's things like that with the pumpkin or things with the fish. There's some stories in some of the West African folklore that I read where a character might fall into a river and the fish becomes a character. But at the same time, these are the types of fish that you can catch in the James River, which is the river that goes through Richmond. So definitely each cube has some sort of connection to a story. There's a swamp where a lot of the eastern seaboard in Virginia is very swampy land. There's chickens, there's roosters, there's fireworks. So there's all sorts of different stories that can be connected to the imagery on every single cube.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to choosing like the best story, I was very entertained by the stories of Anansi the spider, which is a figure in West African folklore. And he's considered a trickster character. He's able to be sneaky and outsmart entities like death itself. So I found that character stories were very, very interesting. And I was also very interested in the American folklore, the African American folklore, especially these kinds of stories that are in some ways familiar and in other ways not. So there's one where there's the story of a cat that is actually a witch, and it's almost like a mystery trying to figure out who did it. But at the same time, it's kind of violent with some of the language used. So I guess that I'm most interested in stories that have sort of interesting, complicated main characters and allow you as the reader to kind of walk along with them, where it's not necessarily trying to teach a moral, you're just following along to figure out what happens next. Yeah. And then at the end of it, of course, I mean, all these stories have connections to real life, real struggles, real triumphs, real things.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, you might sit and reflect on like, man, what did that really mean? But in the moment, you're just captivated by the story of like, oh my goodness, the cat's a witch.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm curious about how this research project is now leading you to even further exploration. I'm sure like you got a lot of ideas from, your time in researching this part of your identity to think about how you can expand on on the cubes, or maybe on the images, or, on the videos. Like you said, you involved your family members to narrate, which is amazing because oral history, I think, is really important for us, especially to document that part of history where it was not documented. So what is next for you in terms of this project?
In terms of this project, I know that there's some images that I would like to redraw, not necessarily because they're bad. I love the way they came out. It's just that I would like to see them in another medium. Just to see what can be conveyed if you paint the same symbology, or if it becomes replicated over and over again. I'm just curious, as an artist, I'm curious to see what the effect will be. And then in general, I definitely know that I'm going to continue pursuing sort of art and design practices that are interdisciplinary. So in this case, we had physical objects, some that can be engaged with. We had the videos, which were definitely a nod to the oral history, like you pointed out, because I'm like, man, like all of this stuff by default is quiet. You put it in a gallery, it doesn't speak. But these stories, for hundreds of years, the original incarnations of them were just spoken. So I decided to make the videos and to incorporate my family. And I know that I'm going to keep doing interdisciplinary things like that. And I would like to involve my family as much as possible in these sort of research explorations. I involved them in my master's thesis, and involving them in this was equally as rewarding, if not more. So I'll definitely keep doing interdisciplinary stuff. I'll definitely keep involving my family with things, and I'll definitely keep sort of trying to figure out how we can turn stories into a way that can be engaged with more physically, or at least in different ways. So in this case, you have an element of the project you can touch, you have one that you can look at, you have one that you can hear. So I want to keep trying to play around with different means of accessibility. And again, like things that you can have fun with, fun with engaging, even if it's like a difficult topic. Like I think that if the entry point is something inviting and unintimidating, I think it could hopefully reach a lot of people.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. And I'm curious also to know about the perceptions, as you said, you involve your family, of them, like your family and other visitors who came to the exhibition. Um, how did like hearing their perceptions change the way you look at your artwork or how you look at your artwork in general? Like, the kind of general views you got and feedback you got from and reflection of people about your project.
I was honestly very nervous that people wouldn't be interested in it. I was worried that it was too much, that it wouldn't be accessible. But after presenting it and talking about it and hearing feedback from my family especially, I'm like, wow, like people are interested in not just the project, but the stories behind it. And knowing also that people have started reading the research paper that I put out, where it sounds so boring and it looks long, and I'm like, no one's gonna read it, but people have been engaging with it, and they love it so far, and I'm like, wow. So it makes me as an artist and as a researcher, as a writer, feel very validated, but also very inspired, where I'm like, wow, so this can reach people. Like, I think I might be onto something. It's not just a shot in the dark. Especially after going through school, and then there was a pandemic in the middle of all that, and not quite knowing how to communicate with people. It got flipped upside down. It's very nice to be in a space or in a place where it's like I can share something and people want to engage with it. Yeah. I hope I answered it. I kind of started rambling at
No,
some
you
point.
did.
Yeah.
And actually, the point about how the pandemic in the middle is also interesting. And it is a universal experience that we all as humans have in common. So it's really interesting that you brought it up. And also, we share. I think also Tim is the same thing. We all share your sense of how much we want to have all these storytelling, the representation of all the artwork we have to be accessible to people, but also to be diverse. And this month is Women's Month, so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on your experience as a female artist in Qatar or in the US. And obviously we all know that we need more female representation in the art and culture field. And we, as part of our organization and also the IA&A, we all want to empower women to, express themselves and to use it as a tool and as a medium to feel that they can share, their voices and their stories. So I'm really curious to hear about your experience. And what do you think nonprofits like ourselves, for example, can do more for more diversity and representation of female artists?
Good questions. Let me think. Well, I know that my experience as a female artist, in general, I think that I have been very lucky to have had other women creatives pretty much in my life constantly. So you're looking at my mom, my grandmothers. When I got to undergrad, I had, two women teachers who really had my back and helped me along. And then I get to grad school, and for the first time, I'm meeting professors who are creatives, and they have PhDs, and they're teachers, and they love what they do, but they're also practicing artists. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I had never seen that kind of representation before. And of course, these are all women from different walks of life as well. And for me, it was very inspiring as a creative to see the possibilities of what even existed for me, not only as an artist, but as an interdisciplinary woman artist who's just trying to exist in the world. So I think perhaps when it comes to, different ways that nonprofits could outreach, I think that that's a good place to start. If it's anything like you are hosting a woman artist for an artist talk or a workshop or anything that sort of introduces to the community that, hey, this type of person exists. This is what they can do. And I think that that's a really nice place to start, if it's helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. And I'm curious also to hear if you can work on any dream project, no limitations. What would that be?
A dream project, no limitations. Oh, well, currently my biggest interest is in like textiles and sewing and stitching and fabrics and quilting. So I think if I had a dream project, no limitations, it would be something in that category. It's like in terms of materiality. And I would want it to be something interdisciplinary. If I had all of the tech in the world, maybe we could do like a VR thing where you can experience it 2 different ways. Gosh, I don't know, but it would be something tactile, and it would be something that has an emphasis on storytelling for sure. The question is, what story would I pick? There's so many ways to go about choosing a story, telling a story. Oh man, I would really have to think about it, because if the sky's really the limit, oh, it's exciting though. It's an exciting thought.
That's wonderful.
Well, that's great. I want to take this time then to thank both of you, Nia and Fatima, for joining us today. This conversation has been very meaningful and informative. Also want to take this time to thank the Cutter for America Institute for Culture for partnering with us. This was such a rare and unique opportunity. And to feature the artists from your grant program during the month of March, I think has really helped to elevate our monthly exhibition to a whole nother level. So thank you very much.
Of course, thank you again so much, Tim, for giving our artists the opportunity to have further representation. It's such a unique experience, and we hope that, again, we'll continue this great collaboration. I think we were talking before the call about the new open call for our Artist Grants 2023 that will focus this year on technology in the arts and how we want to integrate more technologists and to explore the concept of technology in the arts beyond digital. So it's not just about NFTs. It's not just about, graphic design. We want to kind of explore that medium with all its, kind of different components. So we really hope that we will get a lot of artists that can be from your community to submit their proposals. We have 5 weeks left for applications, and we're very, very excited to further support our community of artists in Qatar, the US, and the larger Arab and Islamic worlds. And thank you so much again for this opportunity. It was wonderful to meet you and meet everybody, and we're looking for much more ahead.